Hey everyone, thanks for joining on time. We'll just give everybody a few minutes to finish joining the webinar, and we'll get started. Great, thanks everyone for your patience. Just give everybody another 60 seconds. There's still some people joining now, and then we'll get started. All right, thanks everybody for joining. I'm sure some more folks are going to be coming in as we go, but good time to get started. Here today to talk to you about on-prem migration to CyberArk Privilege Cloud, a CISO's guide to cloud migration and future-proof PAM. So I'll be going through a little bit about the agenda and who's going to be speaking today. You don't have to be a CISO to join this call. You don't even have to be a current CyberArk customer to join this call, but be most interesting if you're looking to migrate your existing on-prem solution. But I suspect even if you're new to CyberArk, you'll be finding a lot about SaaS and how it interacts with what you think you might know about on-prem CyberArk. So super excited to talk to everybody about these subjects today. Just in terms of introductions, before we get started, myself first, my name is Brian Reed. I'm the CTO at KeyData Associates. Recognize a lot of the names on the groups of folks who have joined, so thanks very much if you're currently a KeyData customer. I've been doing CyberArk for quite a while. I wear a bunch of hats at KeyData now, but of course, my heart's always with privileged access management, where I started. So I quite often am involved in those projects. I've been doing CyberArk implementations, consulting, and everything else for almost 20 years now. So a long, long time. Lots of different customers over the years, lots of different projects within each of those customers, probably more than 100 at this point, I would guess. Multiple customers or multiple projects at different customers. So lots of thoughts on CyberArk, where it's been, where it's at now, where it's going in the future, and always open and excited to share all those thoughts with everybody in webinars like this. Joining me today is Vlaho from CyberArk. Vlaho, you just want to take a few minutes and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all of you for joining. To begin with, my name is Vlaho Djurkovic. I'm a solutions architect with CyberArk. I cover both Canada and the US. Work with a lot of customers. It says 5 years there. I've actually hit year 6 now. So I've actually been around since really the inception of Privilege Cloud and what it is today, and what it's become within the platform. So really happy to be here and share some of that knowledge with you folks. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Vlaho. And again, thanks everyone for joining. We're also going to record the session, of course, as is the way now. You'll be able to find this recording on our website if you want to refer back to it in the future. Vlaho and I already talked pretty fast, but if you want to watch it on, 1.5, go for it. Maybe we'll lower our voices a little so we'll sound normal. But that's the way things are now. Welcome if you're watching this as a recorded session as well. What we're going to be talking to you about today, our agenda. First off, Vlaho is going to be talking to you about migration to SaaS, maturing and expanding your PAM program. So I don't want to spoil any of his thunder, but I think you're going to find that the migration to SaaS isn't just about converting like for like CyberArk, getting it off your on-prem infrastructure and saving a few dollars on administration of systems and operations of systems on-prem. I think you're going to find it's kind of a new way of approaching PAM, lots of new features, you're going to have access to, modern versions of the features you're used to. So it'll be a bit of a mind shift as well as part of the upgrade. But of course, all the traditional benefits of moving to SaaS, like less on-prem administration and operation, are also going to factor into it. So Vlaho is going to do an awesome job of explaining those concepts to you over about the next half hour. After Vlaho is done with that, I'll be jumping in with, your migration process options, choosing a path to victory. Few different ways that you can migrate to cloud. This will be particularly interesting to those of you that are ready to migrate and you're just wondering how that can happen. KeyData has a bunch of different services that can address that and experts that can help you in that process. And I'm going to be happy to talk to you for about 10 or 15 minutes after Vlaho's finished his piece. There'll be time at the end for Q&A. Yul is moderating our session today from KeyData, so please feel free to drop any questions into the chat if they're pertinent, and we can answer them kind of in real time. Vlaho and I are open to that, but we'll also save them up, and anything that we can address in real time, we'll make sure that we ask at the Q&A section at the end. You can also just save your questions. There'll be time at the end for you to put them into the chat or put them into the Q&A section once we're finished both of our presentations as well. So we'll have a bit of a time for discussion at the end, and feel free to participate in that. So Vlaho, I'll turn it over to you. If you want to take over the screen share and tell us a little bit about SaaS and how it relates back to what people might be used to in on-prem.
Excellent. Thanks, Brian. And you made a point there that I think is really important to understand, and that's really going to be the starting point of the conversation, is that it's much more than just taking your PAM self-hosted and putting it into what we call Privilege Cloud, our SaaS service. So my hope and my goal for today is that all of you have a better understanding of what our identity security platform is as a whole, what it looks like, what's available to you, and what actually just comes over in the move, because there are a number of I'd say different ways that you can achieve what you were doing with your self-hosted offering that are more secure, better user experience, and all of that. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And as I mentioned, I think it's important to take a look at the industry that we're living in, the world we're living in today, right? If we think about back 25 years ago when CyberArk started, their cloud didn't exist. There was no SaaS services that we needed to manage. We were fairly comfortable with the privilege access that we were protecting within our network boundaries. It was a good place to be at that time, but technology's changed. Technology's evolved. The proliferation and consumption of SaaS services, cloud services, our onboarding of third-party vendors to help us do work, the amount of identities and privilege, not only on the human side, which we're talking about right now, but also on the machine side, is absolutely exploding. We're having more identities being created, more permissions and entitlements. If we think about the cloud providers, already over 30,000 permissions just in those three technologies. Then we take that same concept and we're seeing more and more and more machine identities being leveraged. We're all being asked to automate more with what we're doing. We're not actually being provided more human resources. We're told we need to do more with less. And how are we doing that? Well, we're doing that through automation. And that's really how the rise of machine identities has started here, but it's also expanded out now to AI. So I've talked to a lot of customers. We had our Boston Impact event a few weeks ago. I was at the AI booth, a lot of interest. Organizations are starting to consume, they're starting to build their responsible AI policies. It's no longer just a nice toy where people are using generative AI to ask questions and get return results. We need to consider security when it comes to all of these different types of identities. And what these market trends have actually shown us is that proliferation of identities is actually causing a problem. What we're doing today are traditional methods of controlling technologies today, the ability to take a credential in your vault today, rotate it, maybe use session management for it, great protections, but it's not scaling. It's not scaling with the rate that we're consuming services, onboarding individuals, leveraging machine identities for automation, and we're creating a gap. We're creating a risk gap here. And our attackers know this. They're using new intuitive ways, leveraging modern technologies to get into your environment and maybe even compromise the long-standing systems that you have on premise. So this identity risk is really that's the gap that we're trying to close. And at CyberArk, I mentioned we've been around for 25 years, right? The goal originally with PAM, focusing on IT users, domain admins, your backend infrastructure, really focusing on these types of users. But as technology has evolved, as we just talked about it, we're consuming different types, newer technologies, SaaS, cloud, and all of that. Our workforce has fundamentally changed. The way that we work is changing. It's changing constantly. It's going to change even more with AI coming down the pipe. What we've seen is that on the workforce side, actually any user within your organization, whether it's seconds, minutes, or the whole day like an IT admin potentially, is doing something high risk or privilege in nature. So what we need to do is really have a solution that can scale workforce, IT, talk about machine in a second, but scale at the rate that these individuals work and not only just provide security controls. We've been great at that. CyberArk is excellent at wrapping strong controls around users, but also do it in a way that can scale with your workforce. We're not talking about 200 users in your IT department. We're talking about 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 users. So making sure that we're able to provide the right level of control for these individuals for the type of work they're doing. Take an HR admin that can modify, add users to your organization, a finance team member that has privilege access to payroll information, a doctor that has patient information in front of them. It's not just the technologies, it's also the data that's high risk in nature. Now, we can't ignore the right-hand side here, folks. We can't ignore it anymore. We simply can't. The amount of machine identities that are in our organizations and the systems that they're touching and interfacing with, a lot of those are the exact same system that human users are doing, but they're doing it behind the scenes. They're doing it to automate actions. The number of machine identities to human identities is 82 to 1 now. 2 years ago, our analysts gave us the number 45 to 1. We're growing exponentially on the machine identity side. And we're only going to see this grow even more with the advent of agents, AI, leveraging more of that within our organization. All of these technologies are going to require secrets, machine identities. We need to look at them. We need to secure them. That is the goal of the identity security platform as a whole. Every identity, not just your IT users logging into a backend Windows server, database, the core infrastructure, but all of these other areas of high-risk access, all these other identities that have high-risk access. That's the goal of the identity security platform as a whole. So if you're on premise, why migrate? Why migrate within that PAM umbrella as a standalone? We're going to talk about the other pieces in a minute as well. What are the core reasons? So when organizations come to us, it's usually because of a pain point. With the self-hosted, it's upgrades that can take a while. As we continue to expand CyberArk, because we're looking at these other use cases. We're looking at our web consoles. We're starting to look at our high-risk workforce users and how to provide protection for them. We're having to drive more infrastructure internally as well. So not only are the upgrades taking us longer, we're having more of these components to manage within our infrastructure. And then we're hitting a wall, right? We're hitting a wall where we're crossing that boundary between IT user to workforce, to developer, to machine identities. And so we want to be able to consume those services centrally, have one place for all identities within our environment, one place to manage those identities, one place to provide intelligent privilege controls for those identities. And the platform provides this for you. So we're going to talk about how we do upgrades. We're going to talk a little bit about the infrastructure changes that you'll see as well in a little moment here as well. And we're absolutely going to talk about expanded coverage and even the way that we're changing the landscape of providing your current access with your PAM solutions today through concepts like zero standing privileges, which I'm going to mention in a moment here as well. Now, to provide some real world numbers, this is absolutely important. What we're talking about, cost reductions, resource savings, all of that, the general reasons why organizations move to SaaS, they're real world numbers. So first of all, reduction in upgrade time, 100% reduction in major upgrade time. The SaaS upgrades are managed by us, the on-premise components. The upgrades now, instead of having to download and push the media out to every piece of infrastructure that you might have on-premise, we have a centralized portal for that. So we can push updates to your components that we still have on-premise because we're still communicating with some of those technologies like your domain controllers that we need to manage. The reduction in infrastructure, a lot of the components, the vault, the web portal, all of that get moved away. And even the components that we have remaining, we fundamentally changed the way those services work. We still have the PSM, but we also have a modern session broker as well that you can deploy in parallel that's 16 times more efficient than the PSM. So even the resources that we are running are vastly improved in terms of resource consumption. The number 15 to 30% in reduction day to day, I would say that's probably more. You know, with the direction we're moving, there's been a heavy emphasis on two key areas outside of security. That's number one always. CyberArk is a security company, and we're going to stay that way. But it's on the end user experience. You simply cannot adopt security technologies if your end users are not willing to use them. And the admin experience. So faster to use, easier to use, admins spending less time, not just on infrastructure, but how we're providing access. Again, I'm going to talk about the traditional way and the modern way in just a moment here, but it's really important to understand that this allows you to focus on expanding your identity security goals, not just focusing on domain accounts, local Windows accounts. Let's move on from that. What are we doing with cloud? What are we doing with our SaaS applications? What are we doing with these modern pieces of infrastructure that typically we're giving people admin access to? We need to monitor that and move forward. And that's really the goal of some of these services. So now I did mention, and Brian talked about this right at the beginning, moving from your self-hosted to the platform, even if you're just going to use the Privilege Cloud service, which is one of the services in the identity security platform, there are a number of added benefits you get right out of the gate. And those come through the form of what we call our shared services. So when you log into self-hosted today, you're integrating your solution with an Active Directory. You're probably using some sort of IDP to handle multi-factor authentication. The first thing we did when we started to take our SaaS services, which by the way, weren't always in our centralized platform, they all had a unique way or an independent way of providing authentication. So how do we onboard into this solution? How do we onboard into this service? They also had all of our solutions, we're a security company, had rich set of audit and analytics type information. So we took all of these, the best in breed components, and we centralized them in one place. So first of all, talking about authentication and authorization, we have a fully fledged identity provider built into the platform that handles all authentication and authorization into the platform. That does not mean you have to use CyberArk identity for multi-factor authentication. If you folks are using something today already, great, we can support that. If you're still using Active Directory and that's still in place today, we can support that. But what it does give you is it gives you some cyber resiliency when it comes to actually getting access to your privilege accounts and privilege system and privilege identities in the event of an outage. So if you have a problem with Active Directory and you can't log into your vault today, that's a bit of an issue. All of your privilege accounts now are difficult to get access to. If you're leveraging a multi-factor provider, great, excellent. That's what you should be doing. But let's say Entra has an issue. They're down. You can't authenticate your users to get access to their privilege accounts. That's when we can leverage CyberArk Identity to provide authentication capabilities for our users in those scenarios. Still adhering, still doing multi-factor authentication, but going through CyberArk to provide that. So we're adding cyber resiliency right at the gate. We're moving away from the reliance on Active Directory. The centralized authorization for all services is critical. So as we start talking about expanding beyond privilege access management and looking at other technologies, having one place within CyberArk to manage all of this makes the consumption, the usage, the expansion that much easier. It's not a new product that you need to learn. It's not a new access model that you need to learn. All functions the same way. Now, the next two are very tightly close to the hip here. The first one is our analytics engine. So as we're feeding in all of these events into CyberArk, CyberArk is analyzing using AI those events to determine if there's any risky behavior that's been happening in those systems, whether you're connecting to a piece of infrastructure or you're now logging into your cloud account using an ephemeral access model. All of that is collected in one place within CyberArk and analyze. Now, we can respond to that risky behavior as well. So I'll talk about that in just 1 second because we have some options there. It could be just email, text. We can also execute CyberArk identity flow, which I'm going to talk about right after this, all about analyzing and responding to risky events. Unified audit, as I mentioned, we have a number of services now. We're feeding in audit information. All of the audit information feeds into a single service, which makes it easier for you guys to consume, run reports on, and very importantly, one integration with the SIM. It's not a new service, a new product. Now we got to integrate it again. It's all already there through our shared services. Again, letting you focus on the things that matter, spanning your identity security programs. The last one here, for those coming from self-hosted, this is probably the one that perks up the ears the most, and that is our connection management service, or connector management service. That's responsible for, even when we move you to Privilege Cloud, we're not asking you to open up internal systems to the internet so that we can communicate, rotate services with them. We still have an on-premise component that does that. That's our connector. Now we can manage the life cycle of that connector through connector management. Provides us the ability to do upgrades when they come about, and we can control those upgrades. The other part here, very importantly, is that it also gave us the ability to manage load balancing for any of our modern services. So traditionally, with something like a PSM, you're reliant on a NetScaler, an F5. Not a bad thing, right? You may have that on premise, but it does add another configuration step, another integration that we need to consider. Again, slowing down consumption. The idea here is that we can create your own pooling of connectors here, and you can route traffic accordingly. And so we can take care of all the load balancing in our modern session management service. Been very well received by a lot of our customers as well. I mentioned our analytics engine being the ability to execute an identity flow. So identity flows, again, one of those shared services built into the platform, comes with the Privilege Cloud licensing. This is our orchestration tool. This can do a lot. It can respond to risky behavior. It can do privilege account discovery, which we'll talk a little bit more about as well. It can also be used as an interface for end users. So if you need to prompt the user for some information, or if they need to provide some information ahead of time before access, that can all be facilitated through identity flows. It can be presented through a form, or we can send the user an email. A lot of different options here. And this is really what gives us flexibility to integrate with a wide variety of systems. We're even leveraging identity flows internally to handle authentication flows. So being able to provide an authentication through, an approval through something like a ServiceNow, if I need to get access to like a global admin role within our cloud environment, or something like maybe a key vault writer and reader role within our cloud environment, something privileged in nature, we can all do that with flows. Actually facilitates that for us. So very, very powerful engine built into the platform, comes with licensing. All of what I've been talking about up until now is all shared services capability. Any service you consume from CyberArk, you get those. The next part here is where we start to talk a little bit more about those benefits one-to-one between PAM self-hosted and Privilege Cloud SaaS offering. One of the biggest benefits here is really these next two items here within the specific PAM umbrella. It's the brand new discovery engine. So we rewrote discovery from the ground up. Brand new engine. What it can provide for us today, Windows and Linux scans, not a ton different in terms of the internal capabilities. We do have the EPM agent now, which integrates directly with our scanning service. So it can actually scan and discover local accounts on your device. We're about a 2.5 year out of a 5-year plan for discovery. A lot more to come here. A lot more coming in terms of our ability to actually interrogate and scan and discover accounts in various sources. We have integrations with cloud providers today already. This integrates directly if any of you are consumers of Wiz. We have integrations with partners to help with this onboarding already. Very, very, very powerful. Also leverages that connector management technology, which allows us to do load balancing of the discovery type services, allowing us to, again, scan more devices in a shorter interval of time. Very, very powerful that way. The other part to this is our discovery rules. So once we found accounts, what do we do with them? What controls do we apply to them? What do they need an approval workflow before anyone should be able to see or use that account? That is something that we need to decide and determine as well. And so we rewrote the discovery engine. Actually, it looks a lot like flows here, where we build a flow chart as we discover an account to determine what we should do with that account. Most of the time, you're even going to want to kick off a rotation. That's all part of this discovery rule. It's also not limited. In self-hosted, you're limited to just local, I think it's just local Windows accounts. This works for any account type that we discover within the environment or onboard. That's a key differentiator, right? When we talk about integrations with a Wiz, we're using the APIs to land the accounts in the account onboarding feed, and then we're kicking off discovery rules to determine where those go. Now, another big change that we made here is that we've got our AI built into the discovery rules engine. So as organizations scan 10, 20, 100,000 hosts, they're going to have a lot of accounts they find. And they're going to need some help determining what type of controls we need to apply to these accounts. Where do they go? The AI engine built into Discovery provides recommendations for these discovery rules, really giving you a starting point, right? You can obviously change them, but it's very good to give you a place where your administrators can begin to start writing these rules. And over time, becomes hands-off. As we find a new account, gets onboarded into the appropriate environment. As we find new information about an account, we enrich or update the downstream account, right? So it's got that quick tie-in. Now, this was all built with the idea that we were going to tie it in with our identity protection service. So this is, again, another shared service. This one isn't tied directly to Privilege Cloud, but it does feed in from that discovery engine some knowledge. So it's reading Compass here. This is actually a risk management system launched about 3-4 months ago here. And what this does is it looks at your current environment. So if we're looking at, for example, the discovered accounts here, it provides you with metrics on those accounts, whether or not they've been onboarded, and also the criticality of those accounts. Quite often what we get asked is, hey, look, like, where do we start? What do we do next? What is the biggest bang for the buck? This is going to give you that. So what this is providing us, as you can see down below, we have domain admin accounts. That's clear winner, right? High criticality. Let's onboard those accounts. Obviously, I can't click on all this, but it provides you recommendations. It even will allow you to build that automatic onboarding rule for those accounts as well. So you can just take all the domain admin accounts, place them in your domain admin safe, start rotation right away. So very good for providing information, the current security assessment, but also tracking progress over time. That's incredibly valuable, folks. We need to know if we're moving the needle. Like we need to know we're reducing risk. And how do we do that? Well, we need something to track that. And so the risk management service provides that. Not on this screenshot here as well, but we have 2 other services built into this identity protection portion of the shared service. One of them is our blueprint. There's probably a lot of you folks have gone through a blueprint exercise. That's CyberArk's prescriptive approach to privilege access management. Provides you recommendations, which accounts to start with, which accounts to move on with. So as you can see here, we're finding domain admin accounts, great account to start. If you were to clear out this entire list, which might take you a while, but if you were to clear out this entire list and you're wondering what to do next, you can reference the blueprint. It's going to give you our prescriptive approach, what's the next riskiest thing you should look at, and you can start tackling that. So very, very powerful service. A lot of value here, I find, to our customers. So you're not spinning, you're actually, again, making progress as you're continuing through your identity security journey. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about high-risk access now. And I did mention that in addition to the shared services and all that capability that you get there, we've changed the way that we provide privilege access. Now, the reason we're doing that, again, is because of this explosive growth that we're seeing. We're seeing, on the left-hand side, we have endpoints there. We've got technologies to remove local administrative rights. Definitely something we need to focus on. But as you can see, there's privilege everywhere. We log into Workday, we can move a user between groups, we can onboard a new user, we can log into something like a Kubernetes and take down an entire cluster that might be running production workloads. On the right-hand side, we have machine identities actually doing all that same work, but behind the scenes with API keys, with tokens, with potentially even credentials that your human users would typically use to mimic their actions and abilities. We talk about AI, it's really that balance between human and machine access in the way that it behaves. So in order for us to be able to keep up, we had to fundamentally change the way that we're providing this access. And in doing so, we're also able to reduce risk. So I'm going to talk about the bottom 3 pillars of this pyramid here: unmanaged access, standing access, and improved access. I think most of you folks are customers, self-hosted today. Maybe some of you are just interested in finding out a little bit more today. The idea here is that before having a solution, a PAM solution in place, you're in this area of unmanaged access. We have no centralization of privilege accounts. We're not managing them really in any way. Maybe we're doing some rotation manually, but generally unmanaged. Step up from that is what we've been doing for the past 25 years. Let's take these privilege accounts, centralize them, wrap strong controls around them. Very good measure. Some of those controls might even be an approval workflow that we're driving prior to giving that access. Now, there's a couple challenges here, but the biggest one that I see right out of the gate is these top three pyramids all suffer from the same problem. That identity and the permissions associated with it exist all the time, even when I'm not using those. So if we think about something like a domain admin account, or maybe me, Vlaho_A, in my former life, I ran discovery services and all sorts of things in operations land, and I had access to thousands of servers with one account. My Vlaho_A account wasn't domain admin, but it was pretty close. And if we think about that account, and if that account gets compromised, what can the attacker do with it? A lot. They can move around the whole environment. They have admin access on a whole bunch of servers, databases, etc., all with this one account. The idea with zero standing privileges is that we move away from the model where we have a persistent credential or persistent access in place to the target system or service that we're managing. So the idea here, if we think about something like that Windows account example, is that we're creating or provisioning a Windows account at the time of connection. It's either a local account or domain credential. Same with a database. We're logging into SQL Server, provision the account, or provision the local account, or provision the domain account to give us access. Now, if we go back to that example, and then, of course, we deprovision that access afterwards, so it doesn't exist any longer, short time to live. Go back to the example of what happens if that identity is compromised. Well, a couple of things, right? First of all, the identity that we're talking about only has access to the target that we've granted to at the time that it's connected. We're granting that access either through minting a new account or elevating an existing account. So if we talk about cloud access, this is really the elevation process of an existing account. Remove, same idea on the endpoint, right? We remove local administrative rights, but we need to elevate periodically for specific features or functions that user requires elevation for. But it's only doing it for that specific target that we're connecting to. And it's doing this based on a policy. So over on the left-hand side, if we talk about the attack surface reduction, we can reduce drastically the number of privilege accounts we have in the environment, the number of privilege accounts we have to use, operate, and manage. So if we think about a new employee joining the organization, we have to make them a new Vlaho_A, and we have to then onboard that account. We have to then make sure rotation's working. Then we have to offer it, make sure Vlaho even has access to it. Then we have to make sure that Vlaho even understands how to use that account. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes when it comes to traditional privilege access in terms of the heavy lift that goes away with this. Now, again, if we think about that, the user is going to get access via policy. New employee joins the organization. They become a member of that Windows support group or maybe the database support group. Automatically, they inherit access to the policy via group membership. We don't have to create an account for them. There's no account that needs to be created anymore because that elevation of permissions is going to happen on the CyberArk side. For the remaining credentials, this is where we can really focus in on using technologies like modern discovery and risk management to not only capture and find those accounts, but place the appropriate level of controls that are required for the remaining accounts that we need to manage. Think break glass, shared type credentials in the environment, built-in credentials. That's what we're left with this model. So it allows us, again, to focus on expansion, focus on securing all those other identities that we just haven't had time to pay attention to at all. Now, I talked about modern session management. This comes with the move to Privilege Cloud. So when I was talking about high-risk access, and this has been a game changer. Again, it provides you that ephemeral type workflow for Windows, Linux, database, Kubernetes, more being added to this as well. A ton of different database flavors that we support right out of the box. A number of benefits here. So enables that zero standing permissions model, that ability to dynamically provide access, move away from standing accounts. But it also works for your existing standing credentials. So when we talk about something like a migration, you're going to migrate your privileged accounts over. And then we can actually provide access using these new models, using these new methods. And I'll talk about why that's super important in just one second. And then when you're ready, when it makes sense, and it might even make sense during the migration, let's take those users and put them through an ephemeral workflow without changing much on the end user. The end user experience is exactly the same. They're going to see the exact same type of login and authentication sequence. When they land on the target, it won't be with Vlaho_A. It'll be with the ephemeral Vlaho account that we've created for that short period of time that will get cleaned up either after the session's been terminated or based on the policy duration that we're allowing those users to have that highly permissive access. On the right-hand side, what are the ops benefits? Like, what is the other benefits from this? Well, first of all, the connector is much, much more efficient. As I mentioned, 16 to 32 times more efficient. Doesn't rely on Microsoft Cloud licensing and RDS itself. It's part of the reason why we can be that much more efficient. Has built-in load balancing capabilities. So that connector management service, that's where we go to define all of the load balancing, the routing, and that's an important differentiator too. The way that we're actually routing to these connectors is much more simplified. We're able to either target the hosts, the devices themselves. If we're in cloud, we can use network tagging. We can use the VPC that the servers are responsible for. There's a whole new set of options for determining what we can actually access in the policy that we never had before. We're always reliant on an AD account with a certain domain group that didn't, again, really tell us what it's providing us access to. We just had an understanding that a user had a domain group. The other piece here too is native IDP integrations. So when you're using a connection through something like an Entra ID and you're using that as your authentication source, allowing our users to use their desktop tools and provide strong authentication direct from their desktop really promotes the user adoption here. So it's really a combination of taking the zero standing permissions, the newer modern session capabilities, and leveraging zero standing permissions. Have that the goal that you're moving towards. This is the direction we're heading as an industry. We're no longer going to have those static, long-lived access credentials. We're moving away from that. So leverage zero standing privileges as much as possible. Take advantage of those shared services. I did want to reserve just a little bit of time here just to talk about the end user. I think this is something CyberArk puts security at the forefront. It is number one. It will always be number one for us. But that ability to have end users adopt drives our ability to expand our security posture. If we have a ton of pushback, if users aren't using it, or if they're finding ways to get around it, we've given them access to the password, they're just going retrieving the password. They're not using a session broker or anything like that. We're doing a disservice to the technology that we're leveraging. So CyberArk has spent a lot of time, the past 2 or 3 years, focusing heavily on that end user experience, end user adoption. And with that, the move to Privilege Cloud also, and you'll see here, brand new UI. This is our spaces that we've created. So it's going to look a little bit different. You don't see it under here, but behind the screen here, there's Privilege Cloud Service. That's the one we're primarily talking about when we migrate from self-hosted. But you'll also see we have launched a new secure access portal. This comes with that move to Privilege Cloud. This is a new portal, a new interface for your end users to leverage. And what they can do from here is it's intended to be self-service. So it's intended that your end users will be able to come in here, and if they're connecting to a Linux target, they're connecting to a Windows target, they can actually go in here and grab the connection guidance page for that credential type or that service or server that we're connecting to and import it into whatever tool they want. So it provides that self-service guidance, something that we didn't have before. With the PSMs, we had the ability, Session Manager Service, the ability to do this through an alternate shell field, but it was in our docs page, but it was no guided experience to get there. And so that's what we're offering here. And on top of that, we have the ability to use database clients direct from desktop now. We're no longer putting that through a heavy PSM type session. On the right-hand side, 90% of what we're doing is web-based these days. All of our management consoles, all of that. I would argue that soon we're going to see the management piece of your SQL Server databases all done via web GUI. We also have the ability within the platform to manage these web access components fundamentally differently. Again, no longer relying on the PSM, but adding just a web extension that will track and monitor and control the web session that they're in. Everything from doing recording, and that takes screenshots of what's happening in the session, to be able to alert on specific actions or activities. I actually just got off with a call with a customer yesterday where they had built a homebrew web app, and part of the web app required authentication when they clicked on that specific element in the page. We can do that. It's continuous authentication. So if we need to authenticate a user based on what they're doing in that website, we can do that, or prevent them from doing it, or alerting on it. Some of the popular attacks, what the attackers typically do is they'll log into your IDP and they'll start federating all their users into there so they can start moving around laterally within your environment right away. Why not have an alert when they're in your identity provider making changes like that? Adding an enterprise application in Entra or something similar in one of the other providers, creating an access key in AWS. Great examples of scenarios where we might want to have a little extra visibility and control on that, if not even going so far as to terminate that session altogether. The admin side, again, moving to that policy-based access model where we're not onboarding accounts, we're creating a policy. And as you can see on the right-hand side here, for your cloud environments, we can have all sorts of extra abilities for tagging and providing that access. For on-premise, again, not leveraging that platform type model. I know it's getting a bit into the weeds, but providing a much more flexible method of assigning access within the platform, and then controlling who and when and what they can get access to. So if we're talking about ephemeral type workflows, very good fit for a third-party vendor or contractor, an external person getting access to your environment. They might only require access during core business hours, also controlling when and for how long they can have access for. Now, the last bit here, touched on this, but very important, the move to Privilege Cloud significantly reduces that footprint on-premise, significantly takes away from a lot of the heavy lift that your users are doing, not only with upgrades, but the sheer amount of infrastructure that is deployed. It also takes advantage of modern technologies and capabilities. So a lot of organizations that we're working with are globally distributed. So leveraging technologies like the AWS backbone to facilitate a much faster connection to the downstream system that we're providing access to is also of very high interest. And also, as I mentioned multiple times, just being able to provide load balancing. So the load balancing services has been a big differentiator for us. We've had a number of customers who've either had load balancing with their PSMs, or they got to the point where, hey, look, we'll just manage this. If something happens, we'll reroute connections manually to another session management broker. This takes away all of that burden. Lets you focus again on the identities. Can't focus on that enough. Identities, and providing those right level of controls. So I brought this up sort of, we're nearing the summary here, and I know, Brian, you want to mention a few things as well. And I know at last bit here, I try and fly through this. I just very passionate about this move here is that today you're focusing on just one element here within Privilege Cloud, or sorry, within our PAM self-hosted. You're focusing on your human users primarily. There might be a few machine identities in there as well. We have a whole new set of capabilities when you move to SaaS platform, but you're also only focused on these IT users, that back-end Windows type access. We can no longer ignore the workforce users. As I mentioned, any user within your organization, you sit down with them. I would even challenge you on this. Sit down with any user in your organization. At any point in their day, they're going to be doing something that's privileged. And that's exactly the way our attackers are thinking. They're not thinking, I need this person's account anymore. They're taking whatever they can get and moving laterally. Developers, absolutely critical. I mean, they not only have very similar to access to IT users with the advent of cloud, with their ability to interface with machine identities, and if you're looking at AI, their ability to manipulate prompts within your AI platforms. We have a whole session on this too, if you folks are interested. That's out of scope for PAM self-hosted. So as you start and as we migrate and as we get more efficient and better, when we move to Privilege Cloud and we're able to manage these accounts in an easier way, you're going to look to expand your identity security needs, and you can do that in one place with the identity security platform. So the goal really here, in summary, is to leverage the identity security platform to close that gap. Let's reduce the amount of identity risk we have in our environments by accelerating our ability to add identity protection. This is through zero standing privileges. This is by moving away from spending resource time and money and services hours on upgrades, and instead spending those on expanding your identity security program. It's about enabling easier onboarding of accounts through our new discovery service, through the risk management services. And it's also about identifying what is the most critical for you and taking action rather than spending more time analyzing what is critical for you folks. So I hope this was beneficial. I know it was quick. We ran through it very quickly here, but a lot of strong reasons to move to Privilege Cloud, not just for taking your PAM solution and putting in Privilege Cloud, but expanding your identity security program. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time. Again, I know it was quick, but hopefully you all learned something today. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks so much for that, Vlaho. I think people will be disappointed if they're listening to this on 1.5 because you're going pretty quick there. You had a lot of ground to cover. Thanks for leaving us time for questions. Before we get to the questions, I'm going to just say a few words about the how of the migration. Basically, for those of you that have worked with KeyData before, you know that we have a full suite of services. We have a lot of experts in a lot of different fields, everything identity related, whether that's PAM, IGA, access management, CIAM. We're fully capable in all of these different areas, and that gives us more of a holistic view of your PAM program where it might intersect with access management and IGA, for example. So happy to talk to you, more about KeyData services. I know most of you have already seen the full slide deck. I won't kill you with slides, but just a reminder that, we're your full service identity provider from installation to managed services and training. In terms of the how for the migration, I'd love to talk more about the why. Vlaho covered that really well. One of the questions that we do get before I jump into this is this only possible if we migrate to cloud? Can any of these amazing things that Vlaho was talking about be done by self-hosted, either today or in the future? And some of you are stuck on self-hosted, let's face it. Maybe nobody that's on this webinar, but a lot of organizations simply can't do it for different reasons. And yes, some of these features are slowly making their way to self-hosted, but by and large, the roadmap for these is cloud first, potentially cloud only, because of the way that some of these features work. It's just not going to be possible. So that is a common question that I get just to close off Vlaho's kind of overview. In terms of the migration process, we're talking about taking your data from your self-hosted, bringing it into your a temporary kind of encrypted secure space, and then migrating that to Privilege Cloud. Easy to say, challenging to do. CyberArk's got a migration tool that kind of does that. KeyData also has scripts and things that can help us do that on the edges as well. But there is an approved approach. It's very complicated. You can't do that on your own. I'll just say that flat out. At the very least, CyberArk needs to perform some activities on the tenant management side just to enable this. So it's not as simple as running some scripts and just dumping everything into your brand new Privilege Cloud environment. You need to proceed with some form of caution. Whether you even want to do it all in a big bang approach is open to interpretation. You may want to keep both solutions running for a period of time while you work through some of the more complex use cases. I won't go through all the bullet points on this slide, but it's definitely a question that, we need to address as part of the migration. Do you want to, go disappear on Friday and come in on Monday and be up on Privilege Cloud? Or do you want this to evolve over time, different use cases being migrated at different points? So super important decision. Love to help anyone with that as part of their migration strategy. As part of our migration service, we do have these add-on modules. And, I never like to make a migration more complicated than it needs to be. The migration process is moving from self-hosted to Privilege Cloud. And yet, there is an opportunity for improvement. So sometimes those improvements can be made immediately during the migration process. Sometimes we want to, maybe park those for, once the migration is stable. I'm sure nobody's going to argue that doing too many things during the migration introduces too many moving parts. And yet it is a good opportunity to do some things, maybe even before the migration in terms of planning, vault hygiene. If your vault is a mess in terms of you've got dormant accounts and all sorts of, unstructured data and things that are no longer relevant in your vault self-hosted, we need to take a close look at that and then not get hung up migrating that. In fact, potentially leave it behind. That's a big win as part of the migration process, but you really need to take a closer look at vault hygiene, which I know is something that everybody sweeps under the carpet who has a self-hosted implementation now, is keeping their vault clean of, dormant credentials, old use cases, out-of-date platforms, things like that. New use case designs. Vlaho gave you a bunch of different new features that you're going to use. They could replace things like traditional PSM workflows, could replace things like the current ways that you're scanning for AD and Linux accounts. These features have been kind of radically rethought, and to migrate like for like in those areas probably isn't the best idea. So if we can migrate you to these new features as we're doing the whole migration process, that's a real win as well. If you are going to move away from, let's just say, PSM in some areas, why would you bring that over, get everybody used to the new environment, and then immediately, take them off that environment because you've got access to new tools now? Maybe there's a way we can do that simultaneously. Similarly, with operations and administration, there's better ways of doing things. So maybe your break glass and some other, your reporting can be rethought ahead of time so that when you move to Privilege Cloud, you're not bringing old processes and out-of-date processes even for a short period of time. Lastly, those of you that were underwhelmed with the PTA or other kind of threat intelligence over the years, there's a new ISI service that's in place now. That is threat analytics. Vlaho gave you a sneak peek at the identity protection service, which is amazing. I've seen that kind of that impact in its latest form. There's really great things coming for visualizing and planning, what you can do from a threat protection perspective. And, getting that up and running is a little bit of a job in and of itself that we would like to do as part of the migration too. So point I'll leave you with, it's not just all about bringing your data up into the new environment. It's about maybe doing things a little bit better and cleaner as we go. So love to help you with that as part of the KeyData migration service. I won't get too deep into the actual migration, nuts and bolts. Suffice it to say, we've got a well thought out process, multiple steps that'll take you all the way from the types of planning that we were just talking about to the transition to your steady state managed service. Whether KeyData is doing your CyberArk managed services or whether another organization is, we just want to perform that migration and leave yours, or you could be doing it in-house too, of course, leave your support folks with, the tools and skills that they need to maintain that moving forward. To me, that's, the ultimate success criteria for any migration. So happy to drill down into any specific phases, but, suffice it to say, KeyData's got a really well thought out process that we'd love to talk to you about when it comes time to think about your migration. So thanks on behalf of Vlaho and myself. We're ready to answer some questions. I know we're probably going to run out of time a little bit, but Vlaho and I can talk very fast, as you've heard. So maybe we've got some time for a few. I put my own question into the Q&A. I don't know if that's offside or whatever. I put in the question that everybody asks me, spoiler alert if you didn't see it pop up. But Yul, he's hosting us today. He's facilitating today, rather. Yul, did you want to throw us any questions that you might have or questions from the chat?
Yeah, there was definitely a question in the chat. One question was, how effective can the cloud migration be for a large or extra large scale implementation?
So Brian, do you want to
Awesome.
take that or me? I think maybe you start because we've seen the largest organizations make the migrations over.
Yeah.
And you folks are doing the same thing now. So just so everyone's aware, there was a period of time where CyberArk did all migrations. Where the technology just wasn't at the stage where it needed to be. Now we have our partners doing it. So I don't know if you want to handle that one there, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just tell by example, right? So large organizations are definitely within scope for this. In fact, they're the ones that are going to realize a lot of the value at scale that Vlaho was talking about. And I did put something in the chat about, if you need to do a business case, we're happy to help with that too. Short answer is this scales, the migration process scales to, tens of thousands of accounts and hundreds of users, as evidence. One of the large banks, Canadian banks, I know a lot of the customers here are in Canadian financial. One of the large banks has already migrated to Privilege Cloud. So, that's evidence of, CyberArk's capabilities in that area. Bumps on the road, maybe, but that's why we do our planning. But at scale in terms of users, in terms of sessions, in terms of numbers of accounts, there's no issues there. The issues you might encounter is large organizations sometimes have very complex ways of working and complex use cases. So planning is going to be, the order of the day. And then if it's planned right, I would say it can be done right. Vlaho, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say that's about it. Like a lot of it comes down to planning. And I think Brian, you touched on it here in terms of how we do the upgrade. There is ways that we can break it out too, so that we're not we're not impacting folks, that there's no downtime. We want to limit that as much as possible. It's something that we're doing with the largest organizations because they are the ones that will benefit at scale to some of the changes that we've been making. So nothing really else to add there, Brian.
Cool. Yul, anything else?
Yeah. I'll also add the last question. You mentioned there was a popular question you face that clients ask a lot. What is the break glass process if I can't reach the Privilege Cloud Vault?
Yeah, that one's top of mind, hopefully. I don't know if anyone else was hit by that Bell outage on Monday. It was widespread where I live here in Ontario. Kind of drives home that, none of us can really do much of anything without the magic of the internet, and extend that. Break glass can mean a lot of things. The CyberArk tenant could be going down, God forbid, CyberArk itself, the tenant has a problem. CyberArk's hosted on AWS. AWS could have a problem. There's lots of things that can impact SaaS services and on-prem as well. So, Vlaho, I'll turn this one over to you. I've got lots of answers to that too, but I asked the question, so you can.
No, absolutely. And I was laughing because I don't know if there's been a single conversation I've been on where that's not the first question that gets asked. It's, what happens if you guys are down or 4 down, or if there's network connectivity, or like, what can we do for availability? And it's really twofold, right? It's business continuity and it's disaster recovery. And for both of those, we do have solutions today, and it's something that we're continuously planning on and improving on as time goes on. Like, we understand that, hey, look, if you're going through CyberArk for all of your critical access, that's always on access. We need that. So I'll answer this in twofold, really. When it comes to business continuity and just like maintaining operations, we do have the ability via mobile app to cache credentials on that mobile device that users can access with their own permissions. You can control who has access to that, what credentials they can sync to their mobile device, and so on. And so in terms of just getting access to a credential when you're having an outage to be able to log into a sensitive system, that's probably the quickest way today, and I'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow as well, that we can provide that access. Now, when it comes to disaster recovery, we have a couple of options here. So we have the ability within your infrastructure to deploy a cache of your credentials that are in your Privilege Cloud Vault and have them available to you within your own premise. Now, there are some caveats here, right? So the assumption here is that your authentication source is down. It's no longer available. So what we would use here is a local account to that break glass scenario. So you want to really control who has access to that environment. That's something that we would control using more of a traditional type method, where the credentials to that break glass DR environment are locked down. They're in a specific network. Only specific users have access physically through opening up a safe to get access to the password, that type of thing. Just add those extra controls, because that's really the DR side of it. Then we also have the ability to push credentials to a cloud-native key store. So we have organizations that are cloud first. They're really diving full bore into cloud. They're leveraging Azure Key Vault, AWS Secrets Manager, GCP Secrets Manager. We can push and distribute secrets to those key vaults. Same rules apply. We'd apply very strong controls on who has access to that. It's outside of the vault, so we lose some visibility. We actually can maintain any type of changes to those accounts through that sync as well. And then moving forward, longer term, CyberArk is, like I said, we're constantly working on availability options. So this year, the plans are to have cross-region disaster recovery for privilege accounts. That's currently the goal. Knowing that, take that with a grain of salt. That's from PM, so things can change. But it's on. They're actively working on it right now, so it's high on the list, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come.
Great. Well, and I agree. That's kind of the first thing on everyone's mind when we start talking about this, and super important that everyone, on this call, clients and Vlaho and myself can communicate that concept, because there is this misconception that, we don't want to go with Privilege Cloud because our on-prem solution is so safe in terms of break glass and we can access it and everything else. I would just say you have to rethink that concept, and using some of the techniques that Vlaho mentioned, you can make an argument that, you can make those passwords more available in certain circumstances, in certain types of outages than the level you've even got now with on-prem. So Yul, I'll just double check with you, but I don't think there's any more questions for today.
I think that's it for now.
Wonderful, and we are at time, so perfect timing. On behalf of Vlaho, myself, and Yul, thanks everybody for the interest that you're showing in migrating to Privilege Cloud. If anybody's interested in sharing this recording to their colleagues, it'll be up on the KeyData website shortly. But thanks everybody for attending, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.